Well, greetings, Cap fans. Welcome to episode 273 of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Verbanis, and as always, I am joined by the best gosh darn co-host out there. That is one Mr. Bob Lucius. Oh, Bob, were you sent by someone who wanted me dead? Did you sleep with a gun underneath our bed? Were you writing a book? Were you a sleeper cell spy? In 50 years, will all this be declassified and you'll confess why you did it?
I feel like I should be singing Secret Agent Man or something, but I don't know what.
Secret Agent Man. No, but you are right. It is a song.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
No, I don't know what it is.
I will tell you, millions upon millions upon millions upon millions of people on this planet know the song, especially, I would say, of the female persuasion, if they're Swifties.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I don't know that many Taylor Swift songs, I have to
Yes.
admit.
This was the song called "The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived,"
Oh.
and it was on an album that came out in what year?
Uh 2025.
So close, 2024.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
which is also the same year of a certain book that we are covering today, which is also declassified. Bob,
Yes. It is Captain America, Steve Rogers, Declassified.
notes, interviews, and files from the Avengers archives.
Yes.
Yeah, so we actually have both writers on the show, Dayton Ward and Kevin Dilmore. They're going to join us here shortly, and we'll get to talk about the book and all the fun stories behind it. Bob, it's January 7th, 2026. Where did time go?
How did that happen?
I don't know.
How did that happen, Rick? I'm not prepared.
I know.
I'm not
How are
prepared
you
for
doing
anything.
with your New Year's resolutions so far, Bob? Yeah, 7 days into it. How are we doing?
You ask me that every year. I don't subscribe to the whole New Year's resolution. I'm more of a Tom Cruise, a Vanilla Sky sort of guy. You ever watch that movie, Rick?
No, I'm more of a chocolate guy.
It's one of my favorite. It's very good, by the way. I think it might be my favorite movie of all time. And
Really?
it's a remake. It's a remake from,
Mm-hmm.
I think, maybe it's a Japanese or
Pretty sure
not,
Paul McCartney
not,
did
not,
a soundtrack for that.
he did some songs in that. Yeah, it
Mm.
wasn't Japanese. It was I don't know. It was a Latin American country that did the original version of that, because both of them have Penelope Cruz. She's in both versions.
I think we've talked about this before.
I love this movie, but there's a scene in that movie where every minute, every moment is a chance to turn it all around.
Mm.
So why make New Year's resolutions? You can make them at any time
But do
and
you?
break them at any time,
I know.
and
But
then make them again.
if any is a chance to turn it all around, is it you
Uh,
said?
yeah,
And if you keep doing that, are you going to get dizzy?
yeah. You get really dizzy. Yeah.
Right? I mean,
You turn around enough, you're just going in the same direction you were before. So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, Bob, it is January. Uh, and I gotta tell you, I'm back at work now after my long break,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm ready for the
Excited.
next one.
Yeah. Just looking forward to the opportunity to excel.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Indeed.
yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah.
You know what else I'm looking forward to is there's a lot of cool stuff that we're going to be doing this year. Um, Next episode, we are
Mhm.
kicking off our long tail story of the Jack Kirby's Mad Bomb. So this was Jack Kirby's return to Marvel and return to the character Captain America's, which he helped co-create
Right.
in 1976. And this is a long tail story that will end with Captain America 200, which just so happens that was the bicentennial when that came out.
Yeah.
And we're going to end it with the 250th anniversary of the United States. How
Oh
cool
my
is that?
gosh. That's pretty cool. I may have to share a photograph. I was in third grade
Mm-hmm.
and the bicentennial, and my mom made me a colonial Minuteman costume to wear to school that
Oh,
day. And I
adorable.
know, yeah, I had the tricorn hat
Uh-huh.
and the little, the breeches, the calf breeches, and
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
the whole dealio. So
Oh, yeah, we definitely need to see a picture of
yeah,
that.
to pull that one out.
Uh-huh.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, it's a great story arc, right? And a little crazy, but a lot of fun, a lot of fun. So I think our listeners will certainly enjoy if they haven't read it before, learning about it. But if they have read it before, getting reacquainted with it.
Yeah. And we'll be kicking that off next episode. Make sure you come back for that. But for this episode, let's get to our guests, Bob. We've been keeping them in the green room a little too long, and I think it's time to get them out.
Indeed, let's do it.
The new year brings new health goals and wealth goals. Protecting your identity is an important step. Your info is in endless places that could expose you to identity theft, leading to lost funds. LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Resolve to make identity health and wealth part of your New Year's goals with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Whether it's a movie night or just midday, Skinny Pop is a salty snack that keeps on giving. Made with just 3 simple ingredients for an irresistibly delicious taste and a large serving size that lasts. Deliciously popped, perfectly salted. Skinny Pop, popular for a reason. Shop Skinny Pop now.
Our guests today are the co-writers for the 2024 Captain America Steve Rogers Declassified. Notes, interviews, and files from the Avengers archives from Smart Pop Books. Dayton Ward is a New York Times bestselling author or co-author of more than 40 novels and novellas. His short fiction has appeared in more than 30 anthologies, and he's written for publications such as the NCO Journal, Kansas City Voices, Famous Monsters of Filmland, Star Trek, and Star Trek Communicator, as well as the websites Tor.com, StarTrek.com, and SciFi.com. Kevin Dilmore has teamed with Dayton for more than 20 years on novels, shorter fiction, and other writings, chiefly in the Star Trek universe. As a senior writer for Hallmark Cards, Kevin has helped create books, keepsake ornaments, greeting cards, and other products featuring characters from DC Comics, Marvel Comics, Star Trek, Star Wars, and other properties. He's also been a contributor to publications including The Village Voice, Amazing Stories, Star Trek Communicator, and Famous Monsters of Filmland. We are very excited to have both on the show to talk about their Captain America book. Dayton and Kevin, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting us.
Super excited to have you two here tonight. I
Oh,
absolutely
you say that now.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true. I reserve the right to change my mind later. But been looking forward to this.
Well, we do have a lot of questions to get into, but before we do, for the listeners that may not have the opportunity to have read your book, how would you describe it?
Basically, it's an extended series of interviews with Steve Rogers, conducted over an undetermined or unspecified amount of time that basically just ask some various questions about, where he views himself in history and where he views himself in the modern day versus where he came from, and gets his perspective on the various big events that we all know he took part in the comics. Now, I guess for those who are new to this idea, all of everything in these books are the comics version of the character, not the movies. So, I mean, it's part of a larger conversation, I guess, because we were asked to write a book about Iron Man first, and they said they didn't want a synopsis of all the comic adventures and they didn't want a novel. They wanted something else, but they didn't know what the else part was. They just like that. You're the writers, go figure that out. And so Kevin and I got together, and I'm sure it was over chicken wings as it so often is.
Yeah, even though we're in Kansas City, we don't eat much barbecue together.
Yeah. And then so we worked out an idea. We pitched them an idea about doing, I don't know if y'all are familiar with a series of books called The Last Interview. So they are, each book is basically a long deep dive interview with someone who's notable from entertainment or politics or some other field. And it's usually conducted at a point they're at the twilight of their career. They've had a very long career in whatever they've done. And so they get a chance to reflect back on all of that. So that was our point of departure. And then they seemed to be very keen on it. The people at Marvel Projects were keen on it, and they let us run with Iron Man. And then they basically asked us to do Captain America like 5 minutes after we delivered the Iron Man manuscript. They're like, "You guys in for Cap?" And we're, of course we are. So I'll let Kevin talk for a while now.
Yeah. I mean, it's another comparison that I like to make is the StoryCorps project that where people are kind of capturing their memories in first person. It's very much a oral history. We are adding what we believe are Steve's perspectives, his takeaways, his inner thoughts. I mean, this, it's a little bit different now with comics than it used to be. And remember that Cap started quite a while ago, and so we read our share of issues from the very beginning to get a feel for the character over time. But back when I grew up in my real formative years with comics in the 70s and 80s, there was the conventions of the word balloon for things that he says and the thought bubble for the things that he thinks. Narration's now a little bit different for the narrative styles for comics, but so we read comics, tried to glean what he might have said when asked a question from basically an unnamed interviewer. Probably, I mean, I think there are hints along the way that whoever this interviewer is the same person that wrote the book on Tony Stark, which is very similar in structure.
So, yeah, and let's get back to that. So the book was a follow-up to the 2023 Iron Man Tony Stark Declassified, in which you both collaborated. And of course, I would lose my official Cap fan card if I didn't ask the question. With Iron Man coming before Cap, does that mean that you were both Team Iron Man instead of Team Cap?
No, not both, not both of us. And I would say that we had an affinity, for each of the characters, not just in their comic incarnations, but their movie incarnations. One of the things that Marvel's been doing more since the pendulum has swung from let's hope that comic buyers go see a movie to let's hope movie goers go buy a comic. They've very much wanted to, with Iron Man, I feel like his voice is definitely adjusted more to parallel the, which I would call now iconic Robert Downey Jr. Portrayal and attitude of Tony Stark. So yeah, we went into Iron Man thinking, well, we're not exactly sure how this is going to shake out. When we sent in that first draft, we're like, I hope to heck that this is what they're really looking for. But we did know that we had hit the voice. But I knew that when we were offered Cap, that I was going to rely much more on Dayton's familiarity with the character, because he was much more Team Steve than I was going in. If that's a fair thing to say, Dayton.
Yeah. I mean, Kevin, of the two of us, Kevin is much stronger as far as long time comic reading, comic lore. Like he can cite chapter and verse from some comic 50 years ago, where I'm not quite as gifted in that regard. But when I was a kid, I read a lot more Cap comics than I did Iron Man. And I think the only time I ever really read Iron Man was when I was reading an Avengers title, or there was a crossover, or
yeah, Marvel Team Up was probably for
Marvel
me.
Team Up or something like that. And back in those days, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a comic book store until I was in high school. I used to get my comics at the spinner rack at the local department store, drugstore, or whatever. So I read what they had. So I never really caught on to storylines and arcs and everything. Like there were elements of the Iron Man stuff that I had never read. because at some point in my late teens and early adulthood, I kind of got away from reading comics, and then I came back to it. So I was like, man, Tony went through some stuff. Like at one point, like this whole alcoholism arc and his fall from grace and all that. I never read any of that.
Yeah, you would have missed out on that.
So it was very informative, and because Marvel was very supportive of the projects for all of these books, and they gave us access to Marvel Unlimited, the online repository of all their comics, and it's a fantastic resource if you want to read comics. It is a horrific resource if you want to look for anything that might be in a comic.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
I might have rather been on microfiche sometime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could have just written it in the sand and I would have been able to find it a lot easier. But as far as me being Team Steve, I think I was more Team Steve from the get-go. I've always been enamored with the dual part of his history. The part in the war and then the part in the modern day.
Mm-hmm. And that was something that we had to really think about when we were approaching the story. With they very much wanted us to kind of have this book was out of date, within a week of it hitting the shelves because the new issue rolled out, and Cap or Tony are appearing somewhere in the Marvel universe, at any given moment. And so we knew we needed to kind of put a stake in the ground as to where things were fixed in time for Steve and the interviewer, so we could kind of move backward and forward, as these interviews progressed. And I think that if we were really, I'm going to get granular about it, I would think that the interviews of that took place in the Captain America book were probably in a much shorter span of time than the interviews that took place with Tony, because of the way the stories broke down and how we wanted to chronicle them. We felt like that Tony was less available. Tony at times was, I would not say he is an unreliable source, but I would certainly say he was a hostile one at sometimes. This was one of the last things he really wanted to do. Ironically, he loves talking about himself. So who knew? But with Cap, we very much took the approach of, he is transparent. He is honest. He is proud of being, serving, the people of America. And whenever he sat down, he might have been, I don't know, maybe a little more emotionally reserved than Tony, but he was absolutely more open and willing to speak about things than Tony, which gave us, in any book, regardless of with this is which it's kind of a sideways novelization in a way of some of the stuff that happened in the comics. You need a narrative tension. You need to be able to not only chronicle the arcs and the character development of these guys over time, but you need to show that a little bit in the book. Where is Tony? Where is Steve when we started? And where do we leave them? And are they in a better place? Do they know more about themselves? Do we know more about them? And I really, they told us we did it, so I'll assume we did it. I think we did it.
Well, I think you did it too, gents, because, I've read this book a couple times, and
it's one more than me.
I get that.
I'm teasing.
I get that. The thing is, everything that you just relayed, I get, because that's what came through in the book. And now I haven't, in fairness, I haven't read the Tony story, but I've digested.
I happen to have one for you, right?
I've digested the Steve Rogers book, as I said a couple times, and I got to tell you, it reads like a love letter to Steve Rogers. I mean, you seem to get the character at a very deep level. You get his humility, you get his readiness to give credit to others, his reticence about sharing too much of his inner world. Sometimes he's bewildered about the modern world that he finds himself in, and the culture and the technology. I mean, it reads like, look, Rick and I, we're fans of Cap. We've been reading Cap since the late 70s, early 80s, like exclusive. I know it gives it away, right? We've been doing this show now. We're what, 200 and almost 270 episodes. Rick, Rick started a Facebook group. We got over 4,000 members of the comic book Captain America comic book fans group. We love this character. We think about him, we write about him, we talk about him, we discuss him. And when I read the book,
we do have lives, by the way.
Yeah,
I just want to clear that up.
Yeah.
We have other things going on too.
But when I read the book, I was like, man, these guys get him. And it blew me away because, I've read lots of fiction, Cap fiction, and of course collections and synopsis and things like that. But as a character, it really felt like you got inside that person. And I have to, Dayton, you said you've read Cap for a long time. And Kevin, you got your sporting the Cap shirt there. I see. You come across as people who are fans of this character and understand this character in a deep way that, even a lot of longtime readers don't fully understand. What do you attribute that to? Just good research?
I mean, research is that's part and parcel of being a writer. But when it comes to writing for other properties like, Marvel or Star Trek or whatever, yeah, it helps to be a fan, but it can also be a detriment depending on how you look at it, because you can get wrapped around the axle as far as the fan service. So it's like it's okay to be a fan in the sense that I know where I can go find the answer to a question, or I know which episode this event is discussed in or referenced, that kind of thing. But it's definitely a fine line between that and just over the top fanboy, and I'm going to throw all the toys in the sandbox that I've always wanted to play with, and and throw caution to the winds. But as far as Cap and stuff, yeah, we wouldn't have taken the gig if we weren't fans of the character. That's my personal rule, and Kevin and I, we've talked about it before. It's like I won't do something for a property if I'm not a fan of it to start. If not a fan, but at least familiar enough with it where I can give it its just due, because the fans of that material will definitely know if you're phoning it in. Right?
We know when we read it, when somebody else is.
Yeah, they know a poser when they see one.
Right.
And so the other caveat to that is, if it's a property with which I'm not terribly familiar with, but it looks really damned interesting and I could probably dig in and become a fan of it, then I'll think about the gig. But for this was an easy yes when they came calling. Because we're both, like I said, Kevin is definitely much more learned in the area as far as comic minutia than I am. But we're both overgrown teenagers that never grew up or whatever. So it was an easy yes when they said these books.
Teenager may be giving me more credit than my emotional age. But and the other thing that either one of us would be very quick to say is that we're really only as good as our source material, and there were tremendous amount of writers that have handled this character, and their interpretations of Steve and everyone in his world are where we learned. I'm sure if you read the book, you saw in the back. I mean, that was when I talk about things that I researched, it was very important to me, to everybody, that even if it was just a page in a book that we drew something from I wanted to credit that writer. I mean, we stood on the shoulders of many people that gave us the understanding of Steve, and thankfully many of these writers again built on the ones that came before. So yeah, where we're at with anticipating how Steve might respond to a question, or what takeaway he might have from an event that we kind of have to extrapolate from like it's usually like the next issue, say, man, I really can't believe that the Red Skull showed up again. And then, see Cab number 131, Amazing Ed, or whatever, I mean, so when you're looking at the things that the writers would do as the baton pass between issues, it was usually a little bit of reflection of, what the character was, his takeaway from what happened in the previous month or whatever. So, but yeah, our grasp of him is, and I do think and I don't want to speak for Dayton, but when I was writing, I have to admit that Chris Evans was kind of whispering in my ear as far as if I would write something that Steve said, and that wasn't taken directly from a page. I thought, well, can I hear this in his voice, and does that make sense? And if that sounded right to me, I thought it was okay.
So let's go back to reading the comics, right, and citing the comics. Did you have any favorite creative teams, or did you feel any particular writers really got Steve?
That's a great question.
Go ahead.
I've got all these names that are kind of flying at me. Well, I will say that one of the things that I thought was really cool about Marvel and comics at the time that I was reading and kind of going, and I think this particular story predates. But I'm a science fiction guy. I love superheroes and stuff, but and the Kree Skrull War was terrific for me, and which was something that we made sure to include in both books. And it wasn't Starlin. Was it Starlin who wrote that? See?
Oh, the Kree Skrull?
Yeah.
Oh,
was it Roy Thomas?
I think it was Roy Thomas. Yeah.
Okay. See, okay, yeah. Edit that part out.
I think Jim Shooter was editing. Yeah.
Shooter was editing, and he was, I don't know if he was even in 20 years old yet. But so that was something that I think was a linchpin for me.
I'm a huge Brubaker fan outside of superhero comics,
right?
So it was nice. It's nice when they pull in a heavy bat like that. I mean, Mark Millar during the Civil War arc and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Guy that I read outside of I don't read a lot of superhero comics anymore, but I do gravitate. I will pick up the odd miniseries or special event type storyline. But so it's nice to see those kind of folks coming in there. Not that there's anything wrong with the folks that have been building on this stuff for decades, but it's like, okay, Brubaker's enough of a fan, he wants to come in and write a comic. All right, let's do this. So it was kind of fun. I mean, it was interesting to compare and contrast the different styles and as the storylines evolved over the years. And I mean, we read a lot of comics in a rapid succession, so it was just like a torrent of information. Some stuff was new to me. Some stuff I hadn't read in many, many years, or I only read a fragment of it because that was the issue at Eckerd Drugs or whatever. And so it was interesting to to see all these different styles, but yet everybody had a unifying grasp of the essence of the character of Steve Rogers. I mean, I think that was consistent throughout the different eras and throughout the different writers who came to the page. It was interesting to see that. That's not necessarily the case with some of the other characters that I've read over the years. It's like, somebody comes in and they want to make a big, bold, left turn, or they want to do something crazy and radical, and then they miss the mark for one reason or another. But I found it interesting that there was a consistency throughout the eras of storytelling that we try to consolidate into this book, which helped tremendously, because I think it's interesting that Cap he's always been the same guy. He's always been the true blue American boy, right? And I think that's what's always fascinated about me, is that he's displaced from his original time frame, and the values that he was brought up with, he still tries to emulate those, or and demonstrate those now, even in a time where we're more cynical, where we laugh at stuff like that, or it's the butt of jokes, but there's the guy, he's still standing tall, still doing the thing. I've always been impressed by that part of the character.
Yeah, I would agree. And to be honest, not trying to throw a stone, but there were swaths of comics that we read for the Tony Stark book that were let me rephrase. There were many more longer runs of Iron Man that were not as compelling to me as the runs that we read of Captain America. There were times that the Iron Man books were, I don't know that they were necessarily informing me of the character, whereas a Cap story, I always got something out of that. I mean, when I never felt like I got to the end of an issue and thought, okay, well, that gives me nothing. Whereas, to be perfectly honest, there were times I was reading runs of Iron Man, and I think, okay, well, that I'm not going to include that in the chapter that I'm writing because it doesn't inform anybody of the character.
Yeah, and it's probably worth saying we weren't reading the comics so that we could distill everything into like a recap, if you will.
Exactly.
That wasn't the point. I mean, and in
No.
fact, they specifically did not want that. We're trying to build this. I mean, I must have read, there were stretches where I was reading 20 and 30 comics so that I could get one paragraph of meaningful information to answer a question that the interviewer gave.
At one point in time when we there that's one of the great things about our working style is that when both of us are sick of a project at the same time, that's a problem, but usually one of us is and the other one isn't. and there are times I think I clipped this because I would look at it and just know that I was seen, but Dayton had said I'm spending 45 minutes of reading for 5 minutes of writing time. And I think I think that's probably about right.
Yeah.
I mean, this took a while.
You bring up a great point, and I have a couple questions here, because Dayton, you had said, that you did all of this reading because you wanted to answer this particular question that the interviewer had. So that makes me think, okay, how did you go about writing this? Was it you came up with a list of questions that you would writer think that readers would be interested in, and then went about finding answers to those questions? Or was it you knew all of the stories about Steve and therefore wanted to wrap the questions around that? That's part one. Part two, Kevin, you brought up about, one of you doing this, one of you doing that. How did it work with the two of you co-writing the book? What was the division of labor like? So I just wanted to kind of get on the inside of how you went about building this book.
Okay, so I'm going to answer part two first because I think that will give Dayton, I mean, it seems to it make more sense, I think, for me to talk about that before we narrow into the interviewer. We met with our support team from Marvel, and we offered to them a list of what we thought were significant runs throughout the decades of Cap's publishing. They came to us with things that they also wanted in, that we overlapped a great deal. There were some things we decided to excise, some things so we knew however things were going to break down. And the book isn't necessarily chronological because I think the hook, I'm a former journalist, so the news hook for this book was that there was a milestone anniversary of Steve Rogers being discovered and brought into contemporary times, and so that was so this book was going to kind of celebrate that, mark that as a point where this is why the interviewer wants to sit down and talk to Steve. So once we had that framework of runs and stories that we knew belonged in this book, then we kind of looked at the stories that resonated more with us personally, and broke our chapters down because it's always more fun and easier to write about something that is kind of spurring us. We find more either emotionally resonant or just strictly entertaining. So when we broke down those chapters and figured out who was going to write what chapters that were going to cover what parts, what runs and what milestones of Steve's career that Marvel wanted in the book, I didn't even think about what interviewers' questions were going to be until we had that. Now I think that will help inform our answer to your part one question.
Yeah, so I mean, it's easy to figure out what the questions are going to be when you already kind of sort of know the answers. It's more about how the answer will be delivered. So, for Tony, there's a lot of snark, there's a lot of deflection, there's a lot of, self-aggrandizement, uh, that kind of thing. So, but I mean, it kind of helps set it up because it's almost like writing a screenplay. You're, like, and
Very much.
basically like teeing it up and hitting it. It's like I'm gonna basically throw this question out, and me, the writer, I know how Tony's going to react to it, so it's easy then to fold it around a dissertation on what he was feeling during this event, or that kind of thing. Same thing with Steve. It's like we know how he's going to answer the question as far as the facts of the case are, so it's just a matter of phrasing a question that allows that answer to come forth and be in his voice. I think, Kevin, what do you think?
I think that's exactly it. And here's another critical difference between the two books. In the Tony Stark book, the interviewer knew that Tony was going to be hostile, and the interviewer had to work to ingratiate himself with Tony. On the Steve book, the interviewer went in thinking that Captain America was kind of hokey, and it was up to him to ingratiate Steve to himself. Does that make sense? The interviewer had to figure out whether he even liked Steve, whereas in the Tony book, the interviewer had to make sure that Tony liked him, or at least felt comfortable to talk. And because one of the things that structurally in both of the books, to preface each chapter, it's almost like a recap to an episode. I mean, one of the things that I thought about in this book more than any like straight prose book that we've worked on together. I mean, a chapter is a natural break for somebody to put it down, and kind of like episodes in a TV show. And so we have the narrator kind of confide with the reader about the interviewer's process and how the interviewer is feeling about Tony or Steve at a given time, and there are times, I think, in the Captain America book, more so than the Iron Man book, where Steve is just really, I mean, vulnerably honest and processing things that he may not have processed before this conversation that we're recording with the interviewer. And there are times that we let that shake the interviewer up. I mean, times where, when we're getting into a chapter where, at least with my experience with interviewing somebody, I know this is where we got to take a break. And it's like, okay, well, this, that was a pretty hairy recollection. We're just going to take a pause or change the subject or whatever. So I guess if that helps, it was, it was more, again, we know the answers to the questions. I mean, we can tee up a meatball question when we already know what it is that we want to cover in the book. The hope is that when you're reading it, it sounds like a natural conversation. I do think it would have been kind of interesting to have audiobooks of both of these, to be honest.
Oh my gosh. Sure. I thought of that, and I think I mentioned that to Rick, that would be amazing.
But the only thing that would be weird about it is that, something else we haven't touched on about the structure of the books is that we really do make this feel like a dossier. As you're leafing through it, it is the oral history in the conversation between these two people that is punctuated by either corroborating evidence, sometimes dissenting opinions. One of the things that we had to kind of fight for a little bit in the book was, things that we had created for Tony Stark that were documents that the interviewer knew would inform the reader, that were included, interspersed with the oral history. And there was a couple times that, I really had to push on the editor and say, we are going to lift this word for word from Tony Stark, because if this interviewer is worth their salt, I don't even think we ever gendered our interviewer. This is the source. Here is the after action report that that Rick Jones supplied to the Avengers and to the government. And if that is relevant to Tony's story, and relevant to Steve's, we're not going to just say, oh, well, I already used that in the other book, so I guess I'll pull out this other source. No, I mean, it's just, it wouldn't make sense. So that would have been weird to try to figure out how to do in an audiobook. I think one of my favorite parts of the book for me personally, because it was just a part that I wrote. I did the Kree Skrull stuff. Was that spoiler alert for those who haven't read it? When it comes down to the final battle in this whole saga, that's where the Supreme Intelligence is, or I guess it's the Intelligence Supreme in that particular book, has wiped out like 97 or 8% of the empire that it's controlling. I mean, it's unfathomable, death and carnage. And then it comes down to Iron Man deciding that we need to execute the Intelligence Supreme, and Steve saying, no, this is not how we do things. That this is, I mean, there needs to be justice, there needs to be a process, there needs to be how we do this. And Tony said, screw that, who's with me, and took half the crew of the Avengers off to hunt down and kill the Intelligence Supreme, while Cap and the people who didn't agree with that stayed behind. In the Tony book, we heard about that in Tony's words, first person. And then after that, presented the after action report that Cap had written for the Avengers. In the Captain America book, it's reversed. Captain America talks about his personal experience with, that with Tony's decision. And then and then it's followed up by Tony's written after action report to the Avengers, which I think is I just did that more as an Easter egg for people who decided to read both books.
We tried to get a couple of sources that were used in both books, but we actually did have a couple of instances where we were recounting particular event or, particular things that happened to both characters, but from their points of view.
Yes.
So like Civil War or the Secret Wars or that kind of thing. It's like, I mean, and think, well, was it the original Secret Wars where Tony was not there because he was dead or whatever, whichever one it was? Like, you have to ask Cap.
They grabbed, I mean, Rhodey didn't, I mean, it was funny when they lead up to the Secret Wars, we had Tony like, I guess you're going to have to ask Rhodey. I wasn't there. Okay. Skip on it.
Ask Steve. He'll probably have a lot to say about that. We knew at that point we were probably going to write a Cap book, but we weren't locked in.
Yeah.
And so we had, that was more for our fun than anything else.
Yeah.
But it was for using Civil War, I guess, is a good example. We both characters have a lot to say about that particular event, but we didn't want to just carbon copy everything and change names. It was like, because obviously they were on opposite sides of that particular conflict. So it was nice to be able to get those differing perspectives, and where they miss and where they dovetail. We talked about that one a lot, I think, Kevin, as I remember.
Yeah, and Civil War were your chapters. Yeah,
well, but I mean, like, how do I do this without repeating ourselves, and how do I do this without cheating? It's like I want it to feel like its own thing in case nobody else, nobody reads the Tony.
There was a fairly pivotal issue when the Avengers had broken up and had been broken up for a while, and it was Steve and Tony having a kind of a heart-to-heart that got them both thinking, yeah, we need to get the band back together. And in the Tony Stark book, I think I typed it out as a transcript from a recording of the conversation captured by Tony's armor. And then but in the Cap book, it was all Steve recollecting the conversation.
So one of our patrons, Mark Domeyer, he sent in a question for you both. And quote, I ordered your book from my middle school classroom library last year.
Wow.
And it really stands out on the shelf. How did you go about selecting your material from all the decades of Cap material? And I guess really that is what we're talking about right here is how did you decide what to include and what to exclude when putting the book together? So, for example, you mention Sharon Carter several times, but you don't mention Bernie Rosenthal, which is a character who was Steve's love interest for 6 years. And of course, you know, you left out Diamondback, which is going to annoy some of our listeners. And of course, you know, choices, you know, they got to be made, right? So how did you land on the ones that you did?
A lot of sheets of paper, a big wall, and some darts, I guess. Um,
Well, we also had some direction from Marvel too.
we did have direction from Marvel.
They wanted us to, you know, building on their larger plan of marketing all of the different books in this series. So they were certainly, we weren't hamstrung or anything, like nothing like that. It was just like we would really like to see these, you know, when we laid out a big list of all the things as far as the major events, they liked certain ones, they suggested alternatives, and then we cut a couple I think that they decided they didn't want us to spend any time on. And so, you know, it became more about servicing the narratives of those individual chapters about those specific events
within a prescribed word count.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. In fact, it was weird because what was it, 70,000 for the Tony book?
They gave us 75 for Tony.
For Tony, and then they came back to us for Cap, and they said 60,
50,
or something like it was insane. We were
unconscionable.
But we ended up pushing it. We ended up pushing it to like 65. Maybe that's why I'm getting the number.
I think we did.
It was close to 65 when we were done.
Yeah.
Because we're like, we can't. We have to have this. We have to have that. And then
if we're going to tell the story,
if we're going to tell the story properly,
yeah.
And so then that was but I mean, as far as the choices we made, it was you know, space was probably a big one, and Marvel direction were probably the largest influence.
Yes. Yeah, those
what appealed to us is like, you know, I'm a big fan of Civil War arc, so we wanted to focus on that. And then obviously, but it's you can't write about Cap and not talk about that particular storyline. Just like you can't write about Tony and not talk about, you know, his alcoholism.
Yes,
or the whole
and that was
Stark Enterprises.
Yeah, and I hope it's not throwing you guys off that we keep going back to the other book, but you know, both of them I feel like kind of are hand in hand. We made a conscious decision that you know, I mean, Tony was going to be tough enough to interview without asking him questions about, you know, his body count. And so I mean, Tony's not going to talk about his exes. He just like, nope, not interesting to me. None of your business. You know, Steve, I think, loved some of the people in his life, you know, maybe more deeply than Tony was capable of at the time. You know, which I think, I don't know that he would have wanted to line up and talk about them either. There were certain you know, partners in his life that, you know, definitely added to his, you know, I mean, real development. I mean, you know, how many people has Peter Parker dated, and we still keep talking about Gwen Stacy, you know? There's you know, talk about it enough that we brought her back from another multiverse. But that it wasn't a conscious, you know, thing of you know, the partners, the women in his life are irrelevant. It was very much more of a focus on, you know, what, you know, he didn't necessarily have a woman partner or a sidekick, and that, again, not to diminish, you know, the loves of Steve's life, but you know, I'd rather give the word count to Sam. I think that their relationship and their partnership, you know, brought more to him, you know, after losing Bucky, than any of his dates. But that's just me.
That's fair. That's fair. So I do want to point out to readers that this book covers a big span of time in the comics, right? So all the way back to the origins, up through, I think, around 2021, the 5-issue the United States of Captain America series. And there's a lot of arcs that are covered in here, but there are some recurring themes. And one of those is this idea of Steve Rogers being a man out of time. And I love how you handled this in the interview. And so in the introduction to chapter 3, you write, and this is a quote, that we see the gulf of time across which his life has paused for Steve. But for Steve, the gap is imperceptible, much as it would be for a character in a halted video. But there's no doubt that this idea of Steve being a man out of time has been frequently explored in the Cap comics. It's been the subject of an entire miniseries by Mark Waid. Mm-hmm. but it's not something that's taken for granted by the interviewer or by Steve, who seems to push back on that concept, which sets up a nice dynamic in this book. And I was curious what your thoughts were about this idea of Steve being a man out of time.
I mean, we all have people in our lives. We all have experiences of our own that it's kind of, well, it may sound weird to you, but it's not weird to me. And he fell from a plane, and the next thing you knew, he had, he was revived with no concept of how much time had passed, and why would he? I mean, he didn't. I mean, they didn't thaw him out, and he said, "Is there Star Wars yet?" It's not like he knows something's coming. And one of the things that Marvel was very careful to make sure we had a grasp on, which I think is really interesting, is that as contemporary time moves on, we need to bear in mind that there are certain milestone events in the universe of the Marvel, the Earth 616, that are anchors as far as, yes, it happened 30 years ago, but in the lives of these characters, they've only been this hero for X number of years. They said, Steve Rogers showed back up in the 60s, but in this world, he's only been around for 12 years or whatever the number was. I can't remember. It was almost like as they marched through time, these certain events would follow them like helium balloons on a string. They're always there. I mean, as far, no matter how far they walk, those balloons are only going to be so far back. But with when you think about it, in the 60s, they were like, oh my gosh, you've been gone for 20 years. But he's in World War II. We're going to get to a point where this character is going to have been revived after 100, but it's still going to be relevant. They're not going to change his origin like they did Frank Castle over time. His background that of what influenced him to become the Punisher has differed over time, and that's something else I've deferred to Dayton on, because he's read way more Punisher stories than I have. I think that it can't be lost on anybody that did I have any recollect or any idea when I was a kid that in 15 years I would be carrying around this device in my pocket that not only gave me a window into the knowledge of the world, but let me order a Happy Meal. But yet here we are. I think that because that where we're at with information in doubling over shorter and shorter distances of time, the technology that we're surrounded, looking back on, when I talk to my daughter about ancient history of, well, back in my day, the remote control was tethered to the TV with a cord. We all can feel what Steve feels, that I'm an island, that the river of time is flowing past, and I just stay put. Because everybody feels that way, it's very easy to make that relatable. But yeah, to me, I think that Steve being out of time is just as critical as Kal-El being from Krypton.
I mean, to me, that's the intrinsic element that makes the character fascinating to me, is that he's removed from his point of origin, and he's thrown into what, for all intents and purposes, is an alien world, and he has to start from scratch as far as learning and integrating and assimilating and all that kind of thing. But yet he maintains this core set of values and beliefs that drives him. And a lot of the questions that we talked about it earlier, it's like, are those values and core beliefs relevant now like they were when I was a young buck private in the Army, that kind of thing. And I think deep down he believes they are relevant, which is why he does what he does. And that's what makes him fascinating. As far as the timescale thing, yeah, the Marvel's sliding timescale thing lent itself to quite a few jokes at Marvel's expense while we were writing this thing. because it's like we were like, okay, we're going to remember everything's like 12 to 15-year window or whatever, and then we would get notes back from a copy editor or somebody or one of the other editors in line going, well, shield used to stand for blah blah blah, but back in this issue it was this, the different definitions of what shield, the acronym, stood for.
Yeah,
and we're like, it's always the most recent one. By
right.
your own rules.
That's right. That's right.
You told us that this is what's going on, because and some of those crazy definitions were crazy. I mean, they were insane as far as what they stood for, and we're like, this thing is a mouthful on its best day, but you want us to remember the 15 different iterations that have happened over the course of 80 years. And then it's like, just so it did lead itself to a little comedy, because we're like reminding them of the strictures they put in place for us. And we're like, we did what you said.
When we talk about him being unstuck from time and this and that, I think one of the most fascinating, I mean, for as love it or hate it, and for as for divisive and outrageous it was at the time, the way that we addressed when Steve was an agent of Hydra, I think was pretty cool, if I say so ourselves. Because it wasn't a function of us telling all of the stuff that happened during that occupation of the globe. It was absolutely about where Steve was in his head and how he had to figure it out. I mean, and what burden he carried for, number one, having this happen, and number two, having to rebuild his own reputation when the average person probably didn't really believe what was going on. And that, I mean, when you, with that decision, and help me out in the edit, whoever it was, the writer or team of writers,
Nick Spencer.
What a great way to remind us about Steve's intrinsic alienation and the idea that he is, they found a way without freezing and thawing him again to step into a world that was absolutely different, not just different in because when he was thawed out and returned to America, everybody cheered, and then he rolls back in after all this stuff, and I mean, even some of his friends didn't trust him, and what a great way to bring back and make relevant what it is about the character that mattered when he showed back up in the Avengers, which is, he is someone who is not of this world, wearing a symbol that means something different to everybody. I mean, it's interesting.
I've got a little question there for you.
Well,
so
if we screwed it up, we screwed it up.
No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. Actually, it's one of the most, I think, thought-provoking parts of the book. At least it was for me. And so on this page, your interviewer tackles something with Steve that we frequently talk about on the podcast. And it's this tension between Steve Rogers being Steve Rogers and Steve Rogers being Captain America. And not being able to really do both well at the same time. Like, he can be a great Steve Rogers with friends and a job and a life outside of being a superhero. But then on the other hand, he can be a really great Captain America, but maybe not so great at both. So the interviewer asks Steve, let me understand, being a good Captain America requires the sacrifice of a good Steve Rogers. And you, as the writers, have him basically acknowledging that he finds being a good Captain America easier than being a good Steve Rogers, which presumably involves all that messiness that I mentioned, all that personal relationships and life as we all have to live. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about this central theme, because it is a reoccurring tension. And some writers have really dived into the personal relationships, and others have just completely sort of left them in the past and focused on the hero.
That I mean, was not something that necessarily originated with us. It was certainly something that in the course of, I mean, the issue where Clint invites him out for a beer, I mean, and now here's where I'll put on my Hallmark hat, friends. Um, Emotional connection is important to everybody. And when Steve is, I mean, there are times that he will alienate himself because that's the warm place he can hide. If it's of course you're always invited. No, I'm not. It's just, I'm going to go home and sulk. And I don't know that he necessarily does that, but he definitely has those moments about dang it, I'm different from you, and I mean, like, and that's Marvel people writing to the teenagers that we all were when we discovered this stuff. Nobody understands me, and oh, nobody understands Cap either. He's just like me. And for Clint to recognize that, I mean, it's up to Steve to reach back, but I'm going to reach out. Let's get a beer. Let's figure these issues out. and and they do, and it's cool. And the things that in that exchange, at least that as I was writing it, I gleaned that from the page of the comic. It wasn't necessarily a extrapolation that I made myself. I was just rephrasing what I felt he was feeling in those moments, based on what was written on the page in the original book.
I want to ask Dayton. And you and I are both former Marines, and we've often talked on this show about Jack Kirby and Jack Kirby's wartime experience, and how much that informed how we came to understand Steve Rogers, especially in the '60s, and that personality, the man out of time, sort of being reserved and having a wall, and maybe that was a reflection a little bit of Kirby's wartime experience, military experience. Does that ring true to you?
I think it does. I mean, you know how it is that you have to compartmentalize, when you're focused on the mission, and you have to put your head down and do all that's being asked of you or demanded of you, and whatever personal issues you may be dealing with at the time, they take second place. And a lot of anybody who's been in the military and had a family knows the struggle of how to do that, right? How to my wife is pregnant and I'm not going to get home before the birth, and she's having trouble with the pregnancy, but here I am stuck in the sandbox. And so you understand how you have to compartmentalize your feelings in order to accomplish the mission, or to carry out the mission. I think that's Steve in a lot of ways. It's like once he puts on the outfit and takes on the shield, he kind of he suppresses Steve Rogers, because now he's living up to an ideal that's been created. I mean, that's basically what he was during the war. He was created as he was originally the idea was he was going to be a symbol, for the United States, conquering fascism and everything. And so the shield is bigger than the man. And of course, that's a theme that gets explored later on when like Sam Wilson takes the mantle and other people take on the mantle. They're Captain. So Captain America is larger than any one man in one respect, but in another way, it's intrinsically, it's Steve Rogers. Like without Steve Rogers, there is no Captain America, at least to pass on at nothing else, right? Like if it doesn't work without him being the original guy. If it had been me back in the 40s that they gave the thing to, I'd probably still be sitting in the bar watching the game. So, but they picked the right guy, right? That's what the doc said. It's like, it's not the fact that he's the biggest, baddest guy. It's the heart. It's his dedication. It's his spirit. It's the values he brings. That's what makes Captain America. And so I think Steve, in that regard, when it comes time to put on the outfit and do the job, he just kind of pushes Steve Rogers into a box for a little while, the way we all do when we have to focus on the mission. We have to put away the humanity a little bit, like the things that mean things to us. We have to kind of separate ourselves from all that so that we can do what's being asked of us.
Well, and there's also
I hope that made sense. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, I thought it was great. I mean, and even just the idea of when, for him, he is very aware that he is more capable physically. He is more capable with stamina, with agility, with training, with everything, and there are times that people in his life who don't possess those gifts, don't make it through the mission. And I think that, especially being unstuck in time and having left so many people behind, from, unwillingly, that when he was returned to this time, I think that definitely is something that, when he picks up the shield, he can tuck behind it and not dwell on.
Those are great points. And we have a few more questions. Another one sent
Sure.
in from one of our patrons, Matthew Glover. And he asks a very simple, straightforward question. What was the most challenging aspect of writing this book?
Staying sober. No.
Wow. You had that
It's
one
the
changed.
joke. It was the joke. It was there. I had to grab it.
I think the biggest challenge was just making sure that we made him sound authentic. Like, I mean,
Absolutely.
just that the things that embody him and make him such a character that we all love to read and support, that's the guy that you're listening to talk, so to speak. You're getting his not filtered, but you're getting his unexpurgated thoughts about whatever, and hopefully it's coming across in his voice, or what you have become accustomed to thinking is his voice through your years of reading the comics, or even if you're watching the films. Yeah, I mean, I think it's impossible at this point to separate Chris Evans from the role. But and we knew that.
Hashtag Red Brown.
Hashtag, yeah. Give it up for Red Brown. That's it.
I want to get to that. We'll put a pin in that. We'll come back to Red Brown.
But I mean, I mean, even Marvel acknowledged it's impossible. Just like with the Tony book, it's impossible to separate Robert Downey Jr. from Tony Stark. It's just not going to happen. But don't go overboard too much. But I mean, as we're laughing because we're looking at like recent comics that are coming out while we're writing the thing, I'm like, that's such a Tony thing to say, or a Tony thing to do, or a Robert Downey Jr. thing to say or do. And same thing with Chris Evans. I mean, yeah, that was the biggest challenge, was just making sure he rang true.
Yeah, no notes. That's exactly what was in my head the whole time. With Iron Man, Tony Stark, the mantra that that I kept in my head from it was a Marvel movie line from Doctor Strange, that he'd visited all these different multiverses, and the only multiversal constant was Tony Stark was an a-hole in every one of them. And that was just, that if I could tattoo a line to that would be the one. It just
Didn't he call him douchebag in one of the movies? I forget which.
Oh, I'm sure.
I don't remember what it was, but it was like douchebag.
Yeah,
like,
but so those were the, I mean, we could run our smartass remarks past each other and through that filter, and it was okay. Yeah, this sounds like Tony. But I felt much greater responsibility to make sure that the things that we were having Steve say would resonate with readers as, yeah, that does sound like him.
Yeah, certainly mission accomplished on that. And yeah,
thank you.
I mean, I can't give enough praise for the book and the way that you handled the character. But I want to ask you, what, if anything, did you take away from the project? Were there any surprises about the character with your deepening research, or perhaps something that you came away with, some aspect of the character that you developed a deeper appreciation for, or maybe something that we should take away from the book?
I wouldn't call it a surprise, because I kind of went in with the idea that this is what I was going to find. But I was pleased with, like I said, he's been written fairly consistently over the years across multiple creator teams and different story arcs and reboots and all this other stuff. He's pretty steady, right? Just steady on, keep on going. I mean, I think that's what was surprising, is that the conviction that still drives the character after all these years. Even now, in what is very admittedly a very cynical time, right, for current events, he's still the guy. He's still the guy, that you want at the head of the formation. He's the guy that you want to follow into hell and back. Even in the situations where he was doubting himself, and we went through that in some of the books, where he hung it up for a while, he walked away from it for a while, but he always comes back, because that inner drive's just, there's no stopping it. He is what he is, and that's why he was picked to be the first super soldier, was because of what's in here, not his. So I think that's what I took away from it, was, all those comics I read 40 years ago and all those stories I read still work because of that character, because of the way he's presented.
That's very similar to mine. In the time that we were writing it, and especially compared to the times that we're in now, I thought, why would anybody even believe in America? I mean, we're sitting here writing a character that is critical for the understanding of him and the appreciation of him, to get why he believes in what America is and stand for, and what Americans, who they are at their core, and what they're capable of accomplishing. And I thought, I don't know if I believe it. How can I write something that wait, I've got to put words in the mouth of this guy who embodies it. The people that, I mean, the guy who, when everyone's like, why do I even care about what's going on, can look to and be reminded. And reading these stories, and as we were creating this book together, it restored a lot of my faith in figuring out, okay, I can drill down and see that there are people out there who believe in this, and it's worth believing in. And it just it was a great way out of a malaise that I was feeling, and personally, and one that it's great to know that there's this constant, as I feel like I'm just echoing basically what Dayton had said. But I mean, for me personally, the takeaway was that wow, I can look at the American flag again and feel good.
Well, that's fantastic, and I think I recommend that to our listeners as well. For those who haven't checked out the book, if you want to get that encouragement, if you want to really see and be reminded of what Steve Rogers is all about, the American dream, and it's a phenomenal look into the psyche of Steve Rogers, and I think you guys both did a wonderful job capturing it.
Well,
Now,
thank you. It means a lot.
You mentioned Reb Brown, Kevin. Dayton, in your acknowledgments, you write that you about a debt to Reb Brown, who famously played Captain America in the 1979 made-for-TV movies. He's actually a member of our Facebook group.
Is that right?
He's
Nice.
posted.
That's
He's
great.
posted,
That's
commented
cool.
from time to time. So can you share a bit more about the debt?
I got to remember what I wrote. I think it was something to the effect of, I mentioned that I was a casual comics reader because of just the circumstances of how I came to get comics, right? It just did not, they were not consistently available. So I took what I could get. What I remember though is watching those films, that first movie back in the day when Reb Brown was Captain America. And I don't know, it just sort of like reminded me that this character was out here in comics and I should probably go out and check it out. I don't, when I say that, it's not, it wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't disrespectful. I mean, it's like at that point in time, at whatever age I was back when those movies hit, when was that?
79.
79.
So I would have been
11. Yeah.
So, which 12 is like that sweet spot, like whatever you fall in love with when you're 12, whatever whatever seems to attract your attention and you latch onto it, you seem to carry a little bit of that with you throughout the rest of your life. And like that period between 10 and 14 is probably that, that golden age for me. And so I have fond memories of watching those films and the other Marvel attempts to bring comics to the screen. I was there for every episode of The Incredible Hulk, I think.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
I mean, that's at that point in time, Red Brown was Captain America for me.
And yeah, and I certainly was, that would have been my sophomore year in high school, when I think it was, I mean, depending on if it was summer or fall, but before that, the only real portrayals of Captain America were those Marvel from the 60s, the cartoons from the 60s. When I was
I forgot about those.
when I was much younger, my stepdad took me to a pawn shop. No, but really, it gets better. And this is true. And bought me a Super 8 regular 8 projector. And I would go out and buy these, little like Ken films, the small reels and the large reels. And I had a full length Captain America Captain America episode of I think it was a Baron Zemo. There were 3 different bad guys in this particular one, and I thought, okay, well, this is pretty cool. I almost certain it was a focus on Zemo, but there was a couple other villains in it too. But then the Red Brown movie came out, and I'm like, oh, well, hey, this is kind of cool. I mean, I can imagine that this fictional character, what it would be like if he existed. And and I watched those Marvel movies, and the TV people kind of chipped away the stuff that felt that I identified with in the comic books, that they thought a modern TV audience was too sophisticated, they're never going to buy wings off of his head. We'll just paint him on his motorcycle helmet. That still, there was an earnestness that I would compare with, and again, favorably, to what I enjoyed about Flash Gordon when that movie came out in 1980. It was there was a pulp element to it. There was the the adventure, the setting and the adventure changes with every page. I mean, and those reflected that. I mean, there was definitely a Marvel sensibility about that movie, and I dug it.
And Dale Arden.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
So
I was much more of
Melody Anderson, I think.
Yes. I was probably more a Princess Aura guy, but
oh, okay. You got your kink. That's okay. Yeah, no worries.
So I went back and I read the acknowledgments because I had forgotten what I had written about it, and I realized that there's a better answer to that question, a more serious answer to that question, or a more heartfelt answer to that question. It's like, so because I started reading Cap comics around that same time, and I didn't understand all of the mythology around the character at that point, again, 11, 12-year-old me, I'm like, I pick up a random issue at the store, like, well, he's in the Second World War, then he's back in here, and then he's with the Avengers, and then he's not. And then I'm like, wait a minute. So I attribute my interest in World War II to reading Captain America comics at that age, and then as I grew older, my father was a Vietnam veteran, so I was also had an interest in that as I grew older. But I became a student of the war and those who fought it. So I don't know, in a crazy way, Red Brown led me to being a student of those conflicts, and more importantly, the people who fought it. So in an odd way.
And now he works as a volunteer docent for the World War I Museum, and knows that and knows that conflict.
I didn't. Yeah, that's amazing.
Well, I mean, it's I when somebody says they're a World War II buff or a World War II fan, I don't think that's the right way to phrase that.
Yeah.
It's more like so I call myself a student of the war or the conflicts, and going in the military certainly lent itself to my reading more about that kind of thing. But I started that way because my father was a Vietnam veteran, combat veteran, but he never told me anything about what he did over there. Like I never really heard any real stories about his time in Vietnam, other than like a joke story or a fond memory of a friend or that kind of thing. I never heard anything about what he went through. And so I started reading everything I could find to try to get an understanding of what he wasn't telling me, and then I
Yeah.
did later, as I grew older, I met veterans of Korea and World War II. In fact, one of the guys that was a grandfather of one of the buddies in our scout troop, he was with the 82nd Airborne, you know,
Oh,
and
wow.
did, and so, but again, never wouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It was just
Sure.
something he did, and it's like, so you want to learn what is it that these guys and women are carrying inside themselves after having endured one of the craziest, most insane situations that can be inflicted on a human being.
Mhm.
And
Thanks, Reb. Appreciate you.
yes, my World War II connection is that I grew up in Abilene, Kansas, hometown of General Dwight Eisenhower.
That's right.
My mom married us into the family where through my stepdad, my great grandfather was a high school classmate of Ike's and remained friends throughout their lives. He was one of the founding board members of the presidential library that we've got in Abilene. So, I mean, to grow up and drop into a presidential library and museum for someone who not only was, a two-term president, but also supreme commander of the Allied forces. I got a lot of, when we were talking about things, I mean, operations within World War II, just among us, because we'd all go hang out at the museum and walk around when they had no exhibit and things. And so I've got a lot of that kind of indexed back, and I certainly have a much better appreciation, through movies or writings that Dayton has pointed me toward, but also just the information that I kind of stuck back in my head as a kid growing up, regularly immersed in details of the war.
So, Dayton, Kevin, what projects are you working on right now? Is there anything that you can share with the listeners? Is there perhaps another declassified series coming up?
Well, we have not shut the door on something like that. To be honest, we haven't, resumed any conversations about what's next for the series. I don't know what the publisher's planning. As a creative staffer at Hallmark, being 2 weeks ahead of Christmas, you can imagine what I've been working on.
Right.
Yeah,
Is it a surprise that Christmas is here? I mean, it comes around literally every
come around
year, dude.
Same time every year. So, and yet we're surprised by how busy we are. But yeah, to be honest, other than I mean, there's always stuff on the horizon, but I don't have anything that is far enough along that I could necessarily talk about, except by the time this airs, you can all go to your Hallmark Gold Crown store and buy the ornaments I worked on for 50% off.
Oh, awesome. I will.
I hope you do. I can't remember if we have a Captain America ornament this year or not, but we definitely have some more.
I think there's a Sam Wilson one.
There definitely is. Yeah. You're right.
How about you, Dayton? Anything new on the horizon?
Well, I just a couple weeks ago, I returned to edits on a manuscript for what will be my next Star Trek novel. It'll be out in April. It's based on the Star Trek Picard television series. And I'm working on, I have like 1, 2, 3, I think I have 4 short stories to write between now and after the holidays or early spring. So, and then whatever comes across my way, as far as short fuse, burns hot and fast kind of projects that I do for work. But yeah, as far as Kevin and I teaming up, we haven't really talked about anything specific, but I know we've had a couple of ideas on the back burner for a while that might actually get moved up to the front burner.
I'd actually do, yeah.
So
exactly.
That's one of the things we want to do is we've written a lot of short stories over the years that are not tied to a property. There are stories. And so we've decided we might collect them into an anthology or a collection of our non-IP short fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And sell it that way, because hopefully get some more mileage out of that stuff.
Why not?
Um,
But what's funny about the way that it tends to happen with us, that we might try to long range projects and do things kind of on our own, but whenever we end up working on something together, it's a phone call, it's an email, and all of a sudden, holy crap, we got the next thing, and it's kind of big, and we already need to start working. So and it's more than likely something's going to drop on us in 2026. We're not really even sure what.
Right. Yeah.
that's how it usually starts. Is an innocuous email from someone that we may or may not have worked with before, and they're like, "So, are you interested in X?" And then the next thing I know, we're signing contracts. So, the life of a freelance writer. I call it the freelance dance. So,
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, listen, we really do appreciate you both coming on the show to kind of take us through the uh, the makings of Captain America, Steve Rogers Declassified, notes, interviews, and files from the Avengers archives. And listeners, if you haven't picked up this book yet, shame on you. It really should. It's a great read, and we know you would enjoy it. So make sure you check that out as soon as you can. Dayton, Kevin, thank you so much for coming on the show and wrapping Cap with us.
You're very kind to invite us. Thank you.
yep. Thanks very much. We appreciate it.
All right. Well, that was great having Dayton, Kevin on the show. Got a lot of good insights, and I got to say, yeah, I hope all our listeners get a chance to read this book because it is it's just a fun, good read to get inside the head of Steve Rogers.
It is. I mean, I can't say enough about it, Rick. Enough good about this book. I've, as I said, to Dayton and Kevin, I've read it a couple times. I'll probably read it again. It's an easy read, but it's a really thought provoking read, and they do cover probably 24 different very key story arcs in the Steve Rogers life history, and they're woven together in such a way that it's like reading about his life but through his words as the interview is pulling them out, and it's all it makes them sound authentic. Like, I didn't find anything in this book, any of his responses, the characters' responses to the questions, that I thought, like, nah, they didn't get that. I really felt like they did a marvelous job helping the reader understand this character. Whether you're a longtime fan or whether you're somebody who's just getting into Cap, you'll love the book.
Yeah, you may have to pick up the Tony Stark one.
Yeah, I think I will.
Got me intrigued now. I would love to see the other version or other point of view on some of the same things that they talk about with Cap. So
yeah,
that may be on my list. Bob, this is the point where I want to remind everybody, if you don't mind, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. If you're on YouTube right now, please smash that thumbs up button. Leave us comments on YouTube or Spotify or in our Facebook group, and which is the best, I have to say, best Captain America focused Facebook group in the whole universe, because really it's focused on the comics.
Yeah.
And it's got a great community. We have over 5,000 people there, and certainly a lot of active participants. So make sure you check that out too. And if you feel like getting 4 or 5 episodes a month is worth the price of a comic, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/CapComicFans, and $4.99 a month gets you all kinds of perks, including you get the opportunity to send in questions to our guests, as well as after a few months, you get the What Would Cap Do challenge coin. So make sure you check that out at buymeacoffee.com/CapComicFans. All right, Bob. I think it's enough for the the preamble kind of stuff that we have to do there. Any final words from you?
No, I got a lot to think about tonight. I'll follow on that interview, and I'll probably go back, hit the book again tonight, and more to follow in future episodes, I hope.
All right. For Bob Lucius, I'm Rick Verbanis, and thank you for listening to another episode of the Captain America Comic Book Fans Podcast.